Dangal greetings, Sir Janus. I am Axel Tiremo, and together with my groupmates, we are tasked to do an e-library system that has features such as user registration for students, librarians, and administrators, add, update, and delete book records, search and filter books by title, author, or category, track book availability and borrowed books, generate borrowing history reports, transaction processing for book borrowing and returns, and data persistence using local storage. Before going to the project demo and starting the project discussion, I'm gonna be introducing to you my groupmates and their respective parts to be discussed. First, we have here Gio Perey. We will gonna be discussing the class structure of the classes that are existing in our system. Next is we have here John Michael Atchico. We will gonna be explaining how the Book.js and the Transaction.js works. And then next we have here Peralta James Drancer. We will gonna be explaining about the Storage.js. And then next I am Axel Tirimo and I will be discussing about our Auth.js and our registration.js. And then next we have here Bartolome AJ, Rustria Jamel, and Segundo Jewel to explain the functionalities of our admin dashboard. Then next we have here Bolaños Rain and Tabanganay to explain the functionalities of our Librarian dashboard. And then next we have here Tolentino Renzo to explain the functionalities of the student dashboard.
So, dangal greetings. Our system has a base class called user. This is like the template for all users in our system. It has fields like ID, full name, email, password, and role. We put underscore before the name to show that it's kind of protected. Only this class and its children can use it properly. Then we have getters and setters. Getters are just for getting the value like get ID or get name. Setters are for changing the value but with some validation like in set password method. It checks if the password is at least 6 characters before saving it. At the bottom, there's toObject method which converts the user data into a plain object so we can save it to local storage. And from object method is the opposite. It rebuilds the user from saved data. Now, we have three classes that extend user: student, librarian, and administrator. Extending means they inherit everything from user so we don't have to repeat the same code again. Student adds two extra fields, which is course and year. Librarian adds employee number, while administrator doesn't add anything extra. It just uses what user already has. Each of them also has their own toObject method. For student, it calls super the toObject method first to get the base fields, then adds the student-specific ones like course and year. And then in Storage.js, when we see the data, we call the toObject method to convert everything before saving. When we load it back, we use the fromObject method to turn the plain data back into real class objects. So that is our class structure.
So, greetings. I am John Michael Atchico from 2ITC. So, from my part, the transaction class. So, here, transaction class is the engine of our library system. It starts with a constructor, which initializes records with the unique IDs and a borrowed status. I use getters for the data access, and the setters with a built-in validation to ensure only validated statuses like return or overdue are used. So for data persistence, I wrote toObject, fromObject, and the generate ID utility. This allows us to save complex objects into local storage and retrieve them with professional padded IDs like TX0001. I also built the get all and save all. These are crucial because they handle the local storage, communication, converting our live objects into JSON strings to save them. So the core business of the logic stays in the borrow book and return book, where the system manages the 7-day deadline and inventory updates. For the searchability, for the get by student, get by book, and the get active, please use loops to scan our database and filter specific records so the system can instantly show that what a student has borrowed or which books are currently out on loan. So finally, we have the check over the generate report to calculate total activity and the most popular titles in our collection. For the book class is our inventory's blueprint. It uses a constructor for initialization and generate ID utility to create professional identifiers like VK0001. So to ensure data security, I also implemented the getters and setters and implemented them as a validation layer, blocking empty fields or invalid stock numbers before they reach the database. To handle the data persistence, I built get all and save all methods which our Go local storage. So using toObject and fromObject, they serialize our books into JSON strings, ensuring the library list remains intact even after the page refresh. And for the method, the decrement available and increment available, which will track stock levels during borrows and returns. There is method also for the add book, which handles the creation and saving of new entries. And finally, the delete book methods includes a safety check that prevents removing a book if copies are still out on loan, protecting our transaction integrity.
Greetings, I'm the one responsible in Storage.js, also known as local storage of our e-library system. So first we have here a student array, admin array, librarian array, book array, and transaction array, which is being used to store the class instance that was converted in a plain JavaScript object. So we have here a save data and load data, which is responsible in saving and loading data from our local storage. We also have here a clear specific data that has a parameter key to remove a specific data in our local storage. And we have here a clear local storage, which just deletes all the infos in our local storage. We also have here a seed data that loads dummy data in our local storage if the local storage is empty. We also have here a dummy data for admin, librarian, student, and books. And to convert a class instance into a plain JavaScript object, we use the .toObject method. And we also manually updated the status and return date of some books to have a variety of datas in our transaction. And how does my and we also use a the seed data is being called last to if all the arrays are filled. So it basically does populate our local storage. And how does my part connect in to into our system? Well, my part is basically the one responsible in saving and loading the datas in our system. That's all. Thank you.
Dangal greetings, Sir Janos. I am Axel Tirimo and I'm responsible for doing the Auth.js and the Signup.js file. So inside our Auth.js file, we have here the handle login function. So this function is responsible for all the logins in our system. First, it loads all the existing users based on the role. And then next, we have here a for loop that verifies the account details inserted by the current user, and then next we have here the error handling if the inputted values or details that not match in any of our existing users. And then next, if the details that is entered by the user is existing in our current existing users, we're gonna be performing this block of code. So this block of code saves the uh, user as a current user, and then we have here a switch statement. So this redirects the user based on their specific role. Next, we have here the handle logout function. So this function is responsible for all the logouts in our system. And then next, we have here the get current user function. So this function returns the current login user from our local storage. And then next we have here the guard page function, which prevents unauthorized access for the different pages in our system. And then next we have here the set user role function. So this function sends the user role based if they are student, librarian, or admin. And then next we have here the Signup.js, and this file is responsible for having the handle signup function. So we use this to uh, create a new account and save that account in our local storage.
Greetings po. So, what I'm discussing or what I'm gonna discuss now is still part of admin.js. And continuation, we use document ready to make sure all the elements are ready before the script starts running. So, for searching, the perform search function decides which category to filter based on the search term entered. So if we're looking for people, we use search users for students and librarians, while search books is used for books. So for records of borrowed and returned items, search transactions find them in our history. And on the dashboard, so load dashboard stats displays the total counts and like the number of books and users. To manage people, we use load user table to show the list and open add user modal to open the form for a new data. And for transactions, load transaction table displays the complete list of all borrowings. So we also have a load dashboard transaction table which focuses on showing only the most recent records on the main screen. So for the last is the show notification, which shows an alert box for the user to know if their action was success or have an error. So that's all. Thank you. Greetings. I will now be discussing the parts of the admin.js that mainly focuses on the functions for books. First, we have the loadbook table, which handles displaying the library inventory. All book records are retrieved by book.getAll, and a for each loop is used to populate the table rows with the book's information. The unique book ID is used in the edit and delete buttons for accurate record handling, and a conditional check is also included to show or hide empty state based on data availability. Next function is the Open Addbook modal, which simply resets and displays the form for adding books. Then, the handle addbook function gathers all the information from that form and saves it to the system. Next is the Open Edit Book modal, which finds the specific book using its ID, fills the edit form with all its current information, then displays the modal so the user can change the details. The update process is split into two parts. First is the handle update book, which captures the changes and shows a confirmation modal to double check with the user. Once confirmed, execute book update saves those changes and automatically updates the table and dashboard stats. And for the final CRUD operation, the delete book function triggers a confirmation modal to prevent accidental data loss. Once confirmed, execute delete runs as a unified handler that identifies whether it's a book or a user being removed, then updates our storage and dashboard accordingly.
Greetings everyone, I'm here to discuss the remaining function of admin.js. Next, the function handle add user with the parameter role. This function adds a new student or librarian by collecting form data, generating a unique ID, and saving the user in local storage, updating the table and dashboard, and showing a success message. Next is the open edit user modal with the parameter user ID and role. This function opens the edit modal and loads the selected user's information so the form is automatically filled with the existing data. Next is the handle update user with the parameter user ID and role. This function collects the edited information and shows a confirmation before updating. And next is the function execute update. This function checks whether the update is for a user or a book and calls the correct function. Next is the function execute user update. This function performs the actual update by modifying the user data in local storage and refreshing the dashboard. And next is the function delete user with the parameter user ID and role. This function begins the deletion process by storing the user ID and asking for confirmation. And next is the function execute delete user. This function removes the user from local storage and updates the system. And next is the function filter dashboard transaction with the filter parameter. This function filters transaction records such as recent, borrowed, returned, or overdue. Next function is the generate report. This function creates a library report with the statistics like borrowed, returned, overdue, books, and the most borrowed books. And lastly, the show notification in function with the parameter message and type displays success or error message and automatically removes them after a few seconds.
The load book table function retrieves all start books and dynamically builds the table rows so the interface always shows the latest record. If the librarian wants to add a book, open Addbook modal, simply display the form and handle Addbook gathers the book information and save it using book.addbook, then refreshes the table and dashboard. If a book needs to be edited, open Edit modal, Book ID, find the selected book and load its information into the form. Then handle update book, updates the book details, and save the changes using saved data. For deleting a book, open del modal, first shows a confirmation modal to prevent accidental deletion. Once confirmed, the delete book function removes the selected book from the stored record and refreshes the table. Plus, in the borrow book process, the run the borrow book the run the borrow page function displays all books that still have available copies. So each book has a borrow button that opens the modal using open process book modal. The main logic happens when it happens in handle borrow book, where the system validates the input by the selected book and reduces the available copies by one. So after that, it creates a new transaction containing the book ID, student ID, librarian ID, borrow date, due date, and status. The transaction ID is generated using the generated ID from Transaction.js, which is connected to Atchico's part. That's all. Thank you.
Let's start with the load return books function. This function only shows the transactions that are not yet returned. In this for loop, this block allows the system to filter through the transactions and collect only the records where the status is not yet returned. It ensures that the system only displays items that are currently borrowed. Moreover, once a user selects a book to return, the system triggers the open return modal function. In this function, the system captures the specific ID of the transaction and saves it to a global variable. This allows the system to identify exactly which book it needs to modify in the following steps. Following the confirmation, the setup return confirmation function executes the most critical logic. In this block of code, here the system performs a dual update. It changes the transaction status to return and mathematically increments the available copies by 1. This restores the book's availability in the system inventory automatically. Furthermore, the system manages the history view through the load transactions function. In this conditional statement, this block allows the system to sort the history table dynamically. It checks the status of each transaction against the selected filter, allowing the system to display only returned or pending items as requested. Finally, the setup transaction filters function makes the system interactive by handling the navigation tabs. In this block of code, through this add event listener, the system detects which tab was clicked and retrieves its data filter attribute. It then triggers a reload of the table, ensuring the system displays the correct category of data instantly.
So let me explain to you the core functionalities of this Student.js file. So first we have the search book function that accepts two parameters, which are the filter that comes from the select element. It contains book title, category, and author. And the query that comes from this input element. So first we have a temporary array that is set to an empty array which will serve as the container for the match search book information. Next, we have the book array that contains all the elements or the books inside the system. Next, we have this for loop that checks all the books listed inside the system, and it also have a condition that checks the current book if it includes the query or the user wants to search, and if this condition is true, then the current book object will be pushed inside this temporary array. After running the for loop, the temporary array will be returned as a return value. Next, we have this load dashboard status function that loads all the necessary details needed to load for this dashboard container, which are seen inside these containers. And next, the load my borrow history table that load or render the table of history of borrow history of the user, which are seen over here.